This is one that's actually near and dear to my heart. It's the panel about games as a cultural force, the role of games in advocacy. And so to moderate this panel, we have Sophia Drake from Steel Media, and she will be joined by Amir Ghodrati from Simay Dinc from Recontact Games, Bernardo from Playtra Games, and Pascal Clarysse from Big Karma. So I will hand it over to you, Sophia. And
thank you. No, thank you. And yeah, we'll just wait for everyone to join there. I can see, yeah, there's Amir. We've got Dan's there. Just needs, I think, the video and the audio's joining. There's Dan.
Hello, everyone.
Hi. So we are just waiting for a few others. We're waiting for Pascal and there's Simay. Oh, Pascal says he's there in the chat, so I'm sure he's going to get bumped up momentarily to join us all here. How are you all this afternoon? Well, it's afternoon here, whatever time it is where you are.
Yeah, no, things are going great here. It's a nice, only slightly smoky morning in San Francisco.
Yeah, I can imagine the air quality's not amazing there at the moment.
Yeah, it's like the last days has been quite good here in London. So it's a beautiful end of day. Yeah.
I mean, what's it like here? I have to have the curtains closed. Oh, it's quite nice here, actually. I'm up in Liverpool in the UK, so it's quite nice here as well. But anyway, getting back to the point at hand, thank you so much for joining us. As Kate said, this panel's going to be all about the role of games in advocacy. And yeah, thank you to everyone watching. And, I think we'll dive straight in. But obviously, just before we do that, I want to let you all introduce yourselves, because the audience might want to know a little bit more about you and what you do. To give everyone an update on me, if they don't know, I'm sure they do. My name's Sophia Drake. I work at Steel Media and I lead the Big Indie Pitch and a lot of the indie activities alongside, moderating, presenting and, things like that. So, yeah, all things indie and all things presenting. But we'll go in the order I've got you guys. So, Amir, if we start with you, do you want to just give everyone an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Amir Ghodrati. I'm the Director of Market Insights at App Annie. So my team gets to spend a lot of time analyzing the data that App Annie has about the mobile app economy. And we get to share those insights with the industry and show people what's going on and what's driving change in the market.
Great. And next up, we've got Dan.
Yeah, my name is Dan Bernardo, and I am the founder and director of Playtra Games. Playtra is a quite recent addition to the game industry. We're working for 2 years now. We're working on our first game called Great Fight. And my background is as an anthropologist, and I started creating games to try to understand exactly how, how this media can influence culture and can influence, how we create the cultural landmarks for the next decades or so.
Fantastic. And Simay, I know we know each other, but yeah, just give yourself an introduction to everyone watching.
Hello, everyone. I'm Simay Dinc. I'm a co-founder of Recontact Games. We are producing cinematographic mobile games. But when I entered gaming industry, I saw lack of diversity, and I'm a founder of Women in Games Turkey to empower more women in this industry.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Pascal.
Hello, everyone. I've been in the video games industry for 20 years in various continents, mostly marketing and entrepreneur. And 2 years ago, through my daughter and through many other things happening, I realized that there was a problem of inclusion and representation with disability in gaming. And it's 1 billion people around the world. And so I started Big Karma with a lot of co-founders, and we are trying to do our best in that field.
Fantastic. And yeah, I mean, we'll get straight into it, but like you alluded to, obviously gaming is, massive these days, has been for a long time. It's an established part of popular culture. And so especially as we've seen this year, but as, in recent years, we've seen a growing trend for games to contribute to the common good through their messages, or at least attempt to. Yeah, and I want to put to the panel, why do you think this is important? Or alternatively, do you think this is something that we maybe shouldn't be doing? Does anyone want to jump in? Well, let's go to Dan. We'll go to Dan first, since you're in the middle. I'm picking on you first, but don't worry, we'll be coming to everyone.
No, it's absolutely fine. I'm just trying to be polite. But yes, I think it's a funny thing you say about this. Like, we're trying to show more representation, more diversity in games. But what I keep saying to my team is games take a long time to be made. So what we see right now, there are results of trends and changes in society that happened like 4 or 5 years ago. And they are just emerging now. So yes, because like games and cinema and theater and music, they reflect what we do and they shape what we do. So I find very hard to see a thriving game market without creating something that is, you know, a reflection of what we are living and the problems that we are going through right now. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen in the next years with all that happened this year and last year. But I think this is part of what games as a mission have, is like to reflect and to influence what a society is going through.
Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in?
Go ahead, Simay.
Okay, sure. Like, as a game producer, I always believe that the gaming industry has a multidisciplinary power, and it's enriched by different disciplines and different backgrounds. And I always believe that this industry can create many opportunities for youth in 21st century. And I think the raising awareness and create community is the strongest strongest power of the gaming industry. So we need to use this power in a good way. So we are still working, and the co-creation is one of the other key points. So I would like to highlight in a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
And Pascal, I think you were going to jump in as well.
Yes, first of all, I agree with all these sentiments that culture shapes education as much as our parents, our peers, our professors. And we have all been marked by movies and iconic pieces or music or lyrics. And video game as an industry is now, like me, 43 years old. So it's balding and it has kids and it's growing up. So it's no longer for kids and for teenagers, and it's no longer just for profits. It's 2.3 billion mobile gamers in the world, and we are going directly to their pockets, and we have interactive and we have direct engagement. And some of the games I played in my youth marked me as well and were masterpieces too. So I think there is this natural inclination, and then there is I think the timing as well, which is, the second thing, as a marketing guy, there is what consumers want. The new generations want purpose. And it's undeniable. You can see in all the surveys, and how they can get that purpose. Sometimes they have difficulty to define it themselves. But the fact that they want it cannot be overlooked. And so it becomes more and more important if you want to be profitable as well. And we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years with cancel culture, which is the negative aspect of this whole thing. But because it's a little bit fascistic to cancel things. But then there are the debates, and there are the brands who have to embrace new values that they didn't have to care for before. And trust me, they didn't have to. I was their marketing guy, and they were dismissing these issues like, this doesn't matter for the bottom line. And now they realize it does. So there is that, and then there is the state of the world, where we live through big times of change, which means that technology and other advancements are really exciting. And we working in video games have a chance to see it up close. It's like, oh, the times we live in, it's fantastic. And then you look at the political side of things, and as in all times of change in history, it's turmoil, it's trouble. You have conservative forces who have reasons to resist that change. And so there is an escalation of words and economic struggle first, but then it gets violent. So a friend of mine who is much brighter than me told me 3 years ago, it was at Playtra, which is another company that tries to do game for a good purpose, which is science. They're trying to make science cool. And he was telling me, you know, I'm not a bookmaker. So it's not my job to try and speculate who will win between the forces of right and wrong and good versus evil. But I can tell that the fight is back, and right now it's a tie. My only job is to pick a side.
Yeah.
And there we are.
Yeah. And I just want to let, before we move on into some of those topics like politics, I just want to see if Amir's got anything to add finally on this particular topic. I say topic, this question.
I was like, I'm only going to make it so interesting because I'm going to echo many of the things that, that we've already said. But, I think we're all pretty much on point here in the sense that, there's multiple sides of this. One, it's just important because it would, create for a better like environment, right? Just people engaging with this content on kind of a continuous basis, even if there isn't necessarily a explicit theme in something that someone is creating, frequently even the lack of a theme or the lack of a message is indirectly supporting some sort of message, right? And potentially normalizing people to certain viewpoints or behaviors. And a big part of things that we are thinking about with stuff like this in the industry is just again bringing more balance, right? Bringing more stories from people who aren't necessarily as represented, and viewpoints that aren't necessarily as represented historically speaking, that hadn't had a voice in gaming before. And seeing that increase now is great. And like you're saying, games take a while to make frequently, a little bit faster on mobile, but we should be seeing a lot more of these themes and stories going forward.
Yeah, definitely. So we're obviously, I'm going to try and touch on a variety of topics, but firstly, because I think it's going to be in a lot of people's minds, let's touch on politics and political discourse. I'd like to say that's obviously at the forefront right now. I think politics and political discourse is always at the forefront of popular culture and commentary, but I think we have seen escalations and spikes, especially this year, or let's say in the last 24 months. Do you think this is important for video games to delve into as well, just like the previous question, but which I'm sure you all agree it kind of is based on the previous question, but to delve deeper, do you think this is something that should have balance, or do you think that creators should be true to their beliefs, or equally, do you think that there is certain sides of the argument that, we should be putting extra emphasis on, for example, underrepresented, people?
To my side, because this one for me is quite close to my heart.
Of course.
I think I'm 43, so I'm from the time that in uni I used to have rhetoric classes where you go with your colleagues and you make your argument and you discuss, and then in the end somebody is the winner of the discussion. We live in the world that rhetoric doesn't work anymore, where you just isolate yourself in your bubble. And if no matter how much proofs you show, the person can still say, but I think is wrong, and that's it. So in my opinion, direct messages don't work in 2020. So that's why cinema and games and music are so important, because they can tell a story, they can open up people for different experiences without patronizing, without telling they're wrong, without telling whatever it is. So when I see games like The Last of Us, or actually lately lots of small mobile games, they're very touching, My Child
Lebensborn.
Yeah, oh my God, I love the game. But when you see games like this, they tell a story, they put you in the footsteps, in the footsteps of somebody very different from you. It creates a new kind of narrative. It creates a bit more understanding. So yes, we should be talking about politics. I don't think we should be talking about Trump. We should not be talking about Biden. I don't think this is a place for games to be. But I think games can tell the story about why these people act the way they act, and what is their motivations. And then get the player to decide which side they are.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, I was just someone in the comment section was asking for the title of My Child Lebensborn, so I just quickly threw it
It's
in.
amazing.
But yeah, no, it's a really great game, and the studio are just as nice as well. But yeah, anyone else got some thoughts and opinions on this topic?
I'd
Pascal,
like to bounce on what Dan just said, because he said direct messages doesn't work anymore. And it's absolutely true. And there's something inherently awesome with gaming, which is that the story is interactive and you put down narratives there, but the player ultimately creates his own narratives or her own narratives. Like I was with my Star Wars toys long before seeing the Star Wars movies. I had created my own stories with the toys 3 years before seeing a movie about Star Wars. And that's the impact of video game. Through play, you create your own stories. And it's not even about picking a side, I would say. One thing I repeat all the time in the case of inclusion and representation and why it matters so much, I keep saying, kids don't listen, they imitate. And so if you tell them you should do this and you should say that and they're not gonna listen to that. Give them a video game through which they learn it on their own terms by trial and error and failure, which is awesome and which we should embrace a lot more in our society, especially at a young age. We shouldn't overprotect kids so much, and let them fail, let them try, let them say stupid thing, let them do stupid thing and see what happens in the game and learn, oh, the nuance of this and the sophistication of this. I like also to tell my teams, we are not teachers. We have a Socratic approach, which means we cannot teach them anything. We can only make them think. But to make somebody think, video game is the most powerful tool I have come across so far.
Yeah, I mean, Simay, is this mirroring a lot of your thoughts as well?
So I live in Istanbul, I live in Turkey, and when we're talking about politics, we have to mention the lack of freedom of the journalists and lack of freedom of the media, because they can't talk about politics, they can't really tell the story. So I would like to share my own experiences. Like 6 years ago, there was a Gezi Park issues in Turkey. It started with 10 people, then it reached 3 million people. Everyone in the streets, they were protesting the politics, but the media didn't show anything. The media was showing the Penguin documentary. So as you know, I created a team to make a game about that situation, to reach people in the world and to tell the story about the situation. So I was really focused on the create awareness, raise awareness, and creating the community via games. So in Turkey, we need more games to tell the real stories.
Yeah, definitely.
It makes me so nervous that when we're talking about politics, unfortunately, in Turkey, it's hard to talk about that.
No, I can fully imagine, you know, and I think sometimes there is obviously difficulties in being as, you know, forward in the advocacy as possible in different regions in the world, and obviously we all have to bear different level of burden to help people on the other side of that, well, whatever term you want to use, curtain. You know, Amir, is there anything else you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it's you know, kind of an interesting question, and kind of, you know, linking back to movies and music. You know, there's basically room for, you know, kind of all areas of the spectrum, right? Where you can have things that are, you know, very direct and maybe even somewhat satirical in terms of things that are going on with you know, multiple themes and addressing multiple things. Then you'll have other ones where it's maybe a little bit more subtle. And the big thing is just for the market, you know, you don't necessarily want just all of one type of game, right? You should be having different types of games that are you know, kind of addressing some of the you know, the stories in various types of ways, depending on, you know, what the overall goal is of the story that you're trying to tell. And from you know, creative perspective, it's like, okay, well, are the elements that you're including, are they organic to that story? You know, because if you don't integrate them in the right way, you can sometimes do things that are going to feel forced and inauthentic, which can be really bad. But at the same time, there's certain things that we should be looking at for like every game that comes out, whether or not we act on those things, where it's even just, well, what are the demographics of the characters that exist in this game, right? Whether it's any aspect of race or gender or even just size, right? And how they're created. And those are things that, frequently, most games, independently of what it's about, like that's a very easy one to be able to address, just making sure you at least have like a diversity of representation of the stuff that's going out there. And so that, wouldn't necessarily go against the core story that a creator might be telling. But that is something that is, frequently still lacking, especially for just like main playable characters and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Pascal, I can see you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let's differentiate two things. There is partisan politics, and then there are political issues that can sometimes be very universal, and that you can talk without picking a partisan side in a single country. So the representation is a good one, and Amir is absolutely right. Some things should break the glass ceiling and then become adopted wider and broader, which is logical when you think about the evolution, again, historically of the consumer. It was kind of a truth in the 90s that 80% of gamers were male and young. So the marketeers and business people were catering to that audience. And they kind of missed the shift, but they're catching up now, at least at many companies, that, we have 2.3 billion consumers now. So we have 53% women, or we have old people. And if you consider myself and Dan old, then we really have a lot of old people, and we are the ones spending the most money in it.
Thank you, Pascal.
I discovered in many games that my target demographic was 37 to 44. These are the ones who subsidize the free-to-play experience for the rest of the kids watching the ads and asking $1 or $2 from mom and dad every now and then. The ones with the credit cards, they are the ones paying for the experience. So it's really broad, and you have social casino games are built on women over 55. This was a demographic we didn't have in the 90s. And so it's all ethnicities, all countries, all religions, all genders. And if you still play to the male stereotype, you alienate the biggest portion of your audience because of that old audience that was historic. It's the old saying, old generals tend to fight the old war. You have to catch up now and realize that the war is much different than it used to be. And as for partisan politics, I personally don't like it at all, but I understand that in Turkey, where I've spent a lot of time, and I love Istanbul, it may be necessary. And in Colombia, I understand where I live now, I understand why some people feel it's necessary, it's resistance, and the other side is doing it as propaganda anyway. I will remember that America's Army was a recruitment tool for America's Army in 2005. That's 15 years ago. So I understand if some people feel it's necessary as well, the partisan politics. It's way riskier and much more timely, I feel. It's like a piece in time. It's dated. It's less universal and intemporal, and also more geographically limited.
Can I just add one little thing?
Of course.
So sorry.
No, please. That's the point of the panel. Yeah. Chip in whenever you want, all of you.
We might be talking about this a bit later with more details, but I'm always very nervous when you talk about representation. I mean, you just said, it's something, I agree, that's supposed to be quick and easy to, relatively easy to add. I'm very nervous about representation in games these days because customization is not equal to representation. So you get an elf and then you put an afro head, like hair, and then, okay, solve the problem. We have a black character there. And it's something that I think probably the audiences of games of, from my childhood would not be that sophisticated. Audiences today are much more sophisticated about, when it comes from the heart, and it comes from like, I'm actually creating a game now. There's a black female character, and then people keep asking me, are you doing this just to be politically correct? And my answer is that I could not tell this story being anybody else. So if you cannot tell a story being anybody else, I think is valid. But if just to check the boxes, I think people, like audiences, notice that.
You make a fantastic point that the audiences are getting gradually more sophisticated by the day, and it's been true in human history long before there were media. Look at the books that they were written century by century. We gain in sophistication and nuance and subtlety. And I think this is really important. It cannot be a checkbox that you tick. But I will say this, for some games, it's a start. And as always, when you drive towards a utopia, you might want the big companies to do it wrong first, so that they get some backlash, they learn from it, and they get more sophisticated the second time and third time around. It's a start that they at least try to tick a checkbox that before didn't exist. And in some games, I would say you could do it. In Street Fighter, when we played Street Fighter 2 in the arcades, it was kind of irrelevant, the backstory in that game. So there are some games in which it can just be adding a few characters, but doing it with the same amount of thought and work as you put in Ryu and Ken. So if it's just a quick character that you built 9 days before release for PR, yeah, that's gonna show. But if you just, pre-produce it, give it the same amount of thought and care. Give it care, use your empathy, study, do your homework, and then it can be done. And it doesn't have to be done in every story. There was that debate just yesterday with the Oscars. It's not that you have to do a content piece in history and you have to put black people in a time and place where they were not, just to win an Oscar. That's not what the new guidelines say. It's at your marketing department, at your internship department, for the roles that make sense. And it also can be the LGBTQ community. And it can also be just do what's right for your IP, but at least open your mind and heart. And I think that's a good beginning. Like you, Dan, I'm going at my own problem with a lot more sophistication and time, and I don't expect all companies to do that. But I think we shouldn't throw the stones at them for trying and failing. Like with kids, let them fail a little bit.
They've been failing me for centuries, so I have to do that.
And they've been failing disabled community for millennia. They were cast away, they went in concentration camps around the world, and it was a shame on the family and sometimes a bad spell religiously. So yes, we have centuries to fight back, but let's go at it step by step and let's take what we can. Let's take the allies where they are and then let's educate them on being a bit more sophisticated the next time. I have allies at Able Gamers who have been in the disabled field for 15 years and special effects for, I think, 10 years. Believe me, every now and then I'm the ignorant one on the call. And they teach me something. But I need to be allowed to say the stupid thing so that they can correct me. And that's what alliance can be, I guess. When we don't tick the checkbox, but we have that dialogue and listen to one another and learn from one another. Things can go pretty quickly then.
Yeah, so, I mean, all of those are great points, and what I'm gonna do is blend a couple of questions together, I suppose, because actually just in the discussions we've been having already, we've been touching on a lot of other things I wanted to discuss, and obviously we want to keep room for the questions from the audience in about 10 minutes time. But you know, obviously we've got politics, and if we say politics is one area, we've obviously got, you know, advocacy comes in a range of different sources. You know, there's the core politics, then there's, I suppose, areas that touch on politics but go much deeper than that, such as, you know, inclusion, diversity, representation, whether that's through ethnicity, through race, through gender, through sexuality, all those sorts of areas. But we also have massive topics right now. I mean, as Amir alluded to, one of the side effects of it, you know, climate change. We obviously have, you know, animal welfare as well. So looking at these, what I want to put to you as a panel is, taking all of these into account, are there some topics that you think are much easier for developers who may be nervous about these sorts of areas to, you know, approach? And also at the same time, when do you think is the right time to be considering these things? It might seem like an obvious question to all of us, but obviously, you know, it may be something that people on the panel, you know, are considering, and it's good to know when is the right time to approach all of these topics. So I think if we come to Simay first, and then we'll see how the conversation flows.
I have to say right now, maybe we were too late, but I need to tell the story about, like, 3 years ago, we have to start work with UNDP in Women in Games community. So we organized a Hacking the Future hackathons. So we invited game developers, artists, scientists, and social entrepreneurs in an abandoned village to talk about and develop games with reference of sustainable development goals, which is the climate change, the zero poverty, economical growth, and the
reducing inequalities.
Yes, there are many. We have many problems to focus on. So there were 10 teams, and teams are they chose their problems, and they focus on how they solve this problem and how they raise awareness with games. So it was so successful, and we are still organizing that Hacking the Future events in abandoned villages in different areas to invite the villagers, also the children from 8 to 18, to because we need to involve that age. We need to start in that age to create better future, I think. So I would like to also mention the 1.5, the game which is developed by UNDP, and it's very, very successful. The campaign is based around the mobile game that educates people about climate policy and provides a platform for them to vote on the solutions they want to see happen. So it's very important, because the votes will then be compiled and analyzed by the researchers of the University of Oxford. So then they send them to the policymakers. So up until now, there are 1.5 million people voted, and they played the game. We need to see the more games like that. We need to see more interactive games like that. So
yeah, so I suppose that's interesting as well, because obviously part of the answer is obviously about the holistic research and you know, being early on. But what I take away from it, listening to you as well, is obviously, you know, the educational aspects from us as an industry are just so important as well, which I think is spot on, you know. Does anyone else have any opinions on these areas?
One thing, but go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was gonna say,
sorry.
definitely echo that, you know, the right time to be doing this would be now, or, you know, like 20 years ago, right? Like it's you know, anything to do to kind of, you know, correct for, you know, the fact that, you know, we haven't been making as much of a push before. And, you know, a lot of times, you know, one of the big things you can do to try and avoid, you know, having things come off as a checkbox is to make sure that, you know, your own company has people of various types of backgrounds that are working for that, and that's always going to, always historically has been a big issue with many industries, and especially in like leadership positions as well, right? And again, that's one of those things where even just like understanding the demographics of people that you've hired and what you're doing to make sure you're reaching out to types of talent that maybe you're not having as much success recruiting for whatever reason. Just even knowing where you stand right now can frequently be a big eye opener in terms of how far various companies might need to go. And definitely the larger the company is, the more of a responsibility I feel like they have towards being able to do this, because they're going to be the ones that have the resources to be able to make these changes relatively easily as compared to maybe some other companies. But that's just going to create better stories, better games, and incorporating them, like you were saying, incorporating elements of this into various games can be in pure gameplay mechanics, right? You could very easily imagine a climate change or global warming explicit version of like Super Mario Sunshine or something like that, right, where they're going around and cleaning things up. But in addition to just the gameplay elements, you will have people that are passionate about telling various types of stories of things that are important to them, and just finding ways of being able to get those stories on the world of gaming, right? Sometimes, like I said, it might just require talking to more people and getting more research and look at what's going on. But as I think maybe Dan mentioned earlier, right, art is a reflection of life. The more mature the industry goes, the more likely it is to be focusing on increased art themes, kind of being indies. And movies have this as well, but like you were saying, because you're playing characters in games, there's a very, very strong ability for games to act as kind of like an empathy machine, right? Not only just learning about things that are going on and impacting, but the fact that you're making these choices and seeing what the outcomes of these choices are, you can follow that through a narrative thread, and that is not only a very, very positive experience, but can often be a very rewarding experience for gamers as well. So it's like, oh, this is good for the world, but it's also something again that can be good for the quality of the product you're creating.
Yeah, I think I was just going to say, I think you raise a really good point as well, which is one of the questions I was going to ask later on, but we're not going to have the time. But I just think it is important, as you raised, that what you're doing externally is obviously represented internally. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose. And, and there's no, I think you need to have that going on in the background. You need to have equal representation and real experiences and stories in order to authentically display that on the other end to the consumer. But I'm very sorry, I just wanted to say that, given I know we won't have time to ask the question, but I think I interrupted. Was it Pascal who was talking then?
Yeah, I was about to say we play narratives and characters within environments. So climate change is the same point. You don't have, so many people at the moment make games about climate change. Shout out to Ilmari Akola from For Good Games, and there are others, and it's great. But you can also have your own game that is not about climate change and just have a little bit of sustainable environment mechanics baked in it. Same as for representation. If you do it with subtlety, thoughtfully, with care, and not just as a checkbox to tick, it could be awesome. And as for the time to start, I was about to say, like Amir, maybe 20 years ago, because I wrote a SimCity about a sustainable SimCity in 2010, and then never acted on the game design doc, unfortunately. And I remember that when I was young, Midnight Oil had Our Beds Are Burning as a big hit about the planet that we were basically burning, and it was in 1984 or something like that. So but the time to start something 20 years ago is now. And again, it's about embracing some new layers of stealth learning. Because yes, we have a very important role as a gateway to education, but as a kid, and my kids today tend to hate educational games that are in your face and tell you, I'm going to teach you arithmetics, I'm going to teach you with authority something. And I want to give us all hope. I think it's about us as creators learning more from true science and education and other fields, and then casualizing it, simplifying it, finding the fun in it, to make it in our games in a way that it becomes stealth learning. And I think Angry Birds Space did a fantastic job at that and opened my eyes about the possibilities. Angry Birds Space was done with NASA, and all the science, the microgravity in it was done with NASA. And then you have the updates about Mission Mars with the rover that was driving traffic to NASA.com. And Angry Birds Space was the #1 source of traffic for NASA.com for 2 years in a row. And that is recruiting the astronauts of tomorrow, because you make them fall in love with space. Now they're going to crack the books about physics because they found a motivation. And I think that's where gaming can play such an important role for so many things as a gateway.
Yeah, and Dan?
Sophia, sorry, my dog.
That's okay.
Sophie, enough. Come on.
We love dogs.
So try to be very quick. Two anecdotal stories, just to clarify my opinion about it.
Yeah.
When we start creating our game, somebody said we should create some, like, environmental game. And my first question was, who in the team is really passionate about it? Who in the team really cares about it and cannot sleep at night because of it? And nobody said yes. And I said, we should not do it. We should do things that we really love doing. This is part one, hiring people in your team who really cares about it.
Yeah.
And not that I don't care about it, but I know that other people care much more than I do. And the second one is, I was giving a story, talk on Gamescom maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. And the theme was, I don't, like, as a minority, the name of the talk was Black, Gay, South American, something like that. Like, what am I doing games? And the point was, like, I don't want, the white people in the room to say, hey, I give space to the new people. It's not about that. Is that there is a little joke in the internet that says, a frog says, I would love to have more stories about frog. And then the cat said, like, you are completely right. I will tell those stories. So you should have more frogs in the room. It's not like, don't get the cats out, but it goes back to my idea of representations. Like, you don't understand the story you are telling, it's very hard to resonate. So as in climate change, as in racial politics, as in sexual politics, you have to have somebody who lives that, who lives this in the everyday. And one final thing is that the game doesn't have to, I agree completely with Pascal, the game doesn't have to be teaching anything. The most ecological sound game that taught me much about ecology was Final Fantasy VII. Says nothing about it and tells everything about it. So there's amazing ways to explain this and to tell this story.
Yeah, I was thinking about Final Fantasy VII when I was making my point. And that goes back to the fact that games have always been part of the culture. Not just all of them, but some games were already influential on the PlayStation.
Yeah, and and just going back, because I think you make just the amazing point is that you need to have the people who are passionate, but that also means you need to make sure that in the background you are making efforts to, bring that diversity of opinion, of, representation into your team in order to tell those stories in the most authentic way possible and the truest way possible. Thank you all. Unfortunately, we've got no time for questions, I don't think, because we've run right over the end of the conference. But
can I give you one more dumb thing I want to say. 12 years ago, when we started to not just be all men in my marketing departments, but started to hire women in it, guess what? Our sales with women increased. So to your point about bringing diverse people into your team, it's not because you want to be kind and you want to tick a checkbox and you want to avoid bad PR. It's because they are going to make your team much better. much more global, much more universal. You will make more money.
Yeah.
Is the bottom line.
Yeah.
Great point. So you do have 3 questions in the Q&A, and if you keep your answers concise, we may be able to get to all of them because you do have about 7 minutes left. So,
fantastic. I'm running. I have got the time. Fantastic. I thought we'd run right over. So that is absolutely perfect then. So shall I ask them, Kate? Is that... Or do
either way, it's entirely up to you.
Well, I mean, I'll jump in with the first one. But
okay.
Well, I'll go with Karen's question first because obviously it came in through the chat and then came into the Q&A. And I think it's obviously important, and it'd be great to get insight. So Karen asked, following on from the racial injustice and diversity and inclusion programs that are multiplying by the second, are there groups of gaming companies that are working, for example, diversity and inclusion, employee-based awareness programs? Basically, are there areas that we can point people to that are helping to spread this message and really champion these areas within our industry right now?
I can tell one thing. Like a few months ago, I was part of a panel in Sumo Digital, and they do a great job talking about LGB subjects in the group of employees. And I think that there's great. There's amazing initiative. The one thing that I point out there is that normally if you can find this in companies very easily, especially if they're slightly bigger, either organized by the company or by employees. But the one thing I think is missing is that they are preaching to the convert. Like normally in these meetings, you have just LGBT people. So like we should have like the idea of equality and idea of saying how important we are to be in this conversation. You have to bring the people who are not in the conversation. So one thing I love to see more is events like this. They are not just to minorities. It's so like get the white guys in the room. Let's talk to them. I think that's the more important thing.
Yeah. Anyone else? Or don't worry if you don't have anything, because obviously we've got a few questions that we'll try and squeeze in.
I gotta tell you that with the D&I thing, I often find it to be, from a different perspective than Dan, but arriving to the same conclusion. It's a bit of a band-aid on an open wound, and it's against the checkbox thing. And to go back to the only thing I disagree with you, Amir, so far, is when you said it's probably easier to do for big companies because they have the resources. I would disagree with you on that.
Oh no,
I didn't. Easy.
Sorry, I didn't say it's easier. So easier to find happening right now.
Oh no, it's Amir earlier.
Yeah,
like 20 minutes ago,
okay,
he said because of the resources, it might be easier for the big companies. I find big companies have a lot of inertia, and they need a lot of buy-in and a lot of politics and a lot of people signing off. And there are hundreds of people in various offices around the world, at least when it's not work from home. And sometimes to pass the message down or to get action, sometimes the CEO makes a decision in 2017 and the actual change starts being executed in 2020 after how many meetings and how many documents. In small companies, if you decide something, you can execute it tomorrow. So it's in you. It might be harder in you to decide it, but you can execute it tomorrow. And on that D&I thing, I was like, but shouldn't be the head of D&I to have real power be the human resources head? Because that's where the decisions are made, not discussed. Head of D&I is just a discussion position. So the person I thought to hire as head of D&I, because she has so much experience working with people with disability in the workforce, eventually I told her, you know what? You're going to be a co-founder and you're going to be the head of human resources, because that's where the power of your job lies. And the fact that she's a Black woman is a bonus, but you don't want her to end up being a token. You want her to be in power. So make the mental shift and just do it. And I find that easier at my small startup where I'm the CEO and have just a few partners to call and to agree with, than if I was working at a stock exchange listed company. And, you know, it's slower this way. So sometimes it's just about opening your heart, doing it, don't do it half-ass, like Dan pointed out earlier. Do it with a passion, and be thoughtful. If you decided to do it, be thoughtful about it. How can I do it right?
Yeah. And I just, thank you to everyone. I just wanted to also say thank you, Kate, as well, for offering your expertise in this area over in the Q&A section, since we've sadly run out of time.
I try.
No, thank you so much. But yes, before I get booted out and I pass over to Kate, sorry, Kate, I just wanted to personally say thank you to everyone for being a part of the panel. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
And, I'm sorry we didn't get to go through all of my questions, but I think we got through a good chunk of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all. That was fantastic. That's such an important topic. I realize 50 minutes is not even nearly scratching the surface, but I think you were able to not only get people to think about the topic, but you also touched on a lot of global trends, which was actually the whole point of this track today. So this was a perfect way to end the track. So with that, I will say goodbye.
Thank you,
thank you very much. And with that, I will also thank you once again to our track sponsor, App Annie, for supporting this very important track.